What's up, JEFusion fans? This is Philip and welcome back to another video. So, Kamen Rider Gavv has finally ended and it was one of the sweetest rides in the Heisei era of Kamen Rider and probably, in the entire franchise if you ask me. Well, I am going to talk about this video in quite a bit of detail, so just to be sure, so there's going to be a word of warning. There are going to be spoilers ahead because, like I've said, I'm going to talk about this video in detail, and it's going to also help me, you know, express my own reactions in a detailed and clear manner. Like, if I, let's say, do this in a spoiler free way, I could, as I have done in the past, like, my actual reactions are gonna be vague and not clear. Again, just to avoid spoilers. But I think it's been more than 24 hours since, Kamen Rider Gavv the final episode came out, and it's definitely available on the internet already, and most likely there are like subgroups, subtitling groups who have already, posted subbed versions, or maybe if not, I guess you could find the episode raw. But if you want subtitle versions, then you might have to wait a bit longer. But anyways, so with that said, if you haven't seen the final episode of Kamen Rider Gavv yet, I highly advise you to catch up and finish the entire series now and come back to this video when you're finished. Otherwise, enjoy. So, I would like to talk about this video and or what I would like to talk about in this video rather. So, I'm going to basically go through 5 parts. So the first 3 parts are about each of the main riders' final battles. The fourth one is the epilogue, or basically the ending of, the finale, basically. And the last part is going to, in the last part, we're going to talk about, my thoughts on Kamen Rider Gavv overall as a show. So, like, what were the good parts, what were the bad parts, and overall what I think of Kamen Rider Gavv in general from start to finish. So with that said, let's go to part 1. Now, obviously, this is going to be about Shoma versus Rango. So this is a fight that we've been waiting for since basically episode 1. This final duel between brothers that we've been building up to. So again, we have gone through this route. I probably have mentioned this possibility, way back with my very early predictions. And yes, so we have gone through this one. Again, it's not really a surprise to me. I mean, like, we can all pretty much understand what happens here. So Shoma does end up fighting Rango, and what happens here is basically Shoma goes all out with his forms. Like, he actually starts from like master going down to the original popping gumi forms. So Dango basically tries to, remove each and every power up that Shoma has, and Shoma tries to counter with each and every main form that he's used, like, again, Blizzard Sorbet, Caking Form, like Vrokan, Fuamalo, like Chokodon, Zaku Zaku Chips, and going down to Caking, or Popping Gumi, rather. The only form that Shoma hasn't used against Dango was that Bushel uh, cake. So if you remember, like, around December 2024, so around the Christmas time, just before Caking's debut, like one episode before that, Shoma did have a cake-based power-up, the one with the big axe. And he doesn't even use that. So it was probably just a one-off form. And those who are asking, what about the amazing Gumi? Well, it was a form specifically made just to counter Bokkajal. So, sorry, it was just also another one-off form for Shoma. Although technically it could have been Shoma's most powerful form. And had he used it against Rango, I think the fight could have ended much sooner, in my opinion. So, basically, what happens is, again, Shoma goes all out with his forms, down to the popping Gumi, and yeah, he does end up defeating Rango once and for all. Like, this is something that we can see happening, whether it's spoiler or not. Again, that's what happens. Uh, I just feel sorry for fans of the show who wanted Nango to have redemption arc, or like maybe there was some way that Shoma could have convinced his brother to stop doing what he's doing. But Nango says, no, I'm gonna be like this until the very end. So, okay. Shoma does his typical dosuru catchphrase, like, are you gonna stop, or am I gonna have to beat you? Like, oh, I'm gonna beat you, says Rango. Like, fine, you leave me no choice. And then, final battle, finish, Shoma wins, Rango, bye bye. So, yeah, that's basically how I could put it in the most basic sense. But you get the picture, right? So, yeah, what is quite touching, if you will, in this scene. So Shoma does, again, basically he ends up killing his brother, right? But he still leaves a pack of, gummies. Like, here you go, we could have shared this, bro, type of situation. He says nothing, just leaves a pack of his usual, gummy candy, just right where Nango stood until the very end. So, here you go. I'm just gonna give this as an offer to you. Like, it could have ended differently for us, but that's what you really want, then I had no choice but to stop you, kind of situation for Shoma. It makes sense. But, again, it's what happened. So let's move on to the next part, which is Hanto's final battle. So, as we have basically seen in the previews for the final episode, so we see Hanto go up against both Jeep and Lizelle. So, technically, like, Hanto doesn't have any beef with them. Like, again, in a personal sense, like, Jeeves main motivation for fighting is to get revenge on Shoma for basically killing Cheetah. And, we've seen Shoma and Jeep, squabble in their Gavv forms, but again, in order to focus on the Dango versus Shoma duel, so somebody else has to stop Jeep from, interfering, you could say. So this is where Hanto steps in. So in the previous episode, Hanto collects all, the imprisoned people, those who have been turned into acrylic stands, basically, with the help of Nakia, of course. So he is able to get them back into the human world, and Jeep follows along. So, you know, Hanto has to stop them. And this is where also Lizelle comes in. Now, of course, we know that the Kamen Riders plus Rango have defeated Oka, and obviously Lizelle's gonna want some payback for what happened to her dad, so that makes sense. So she asks Jeev to let her join in the battle, and while he initially is reluctant to put her in any danger, well, he eventually relents because she says like, I finally understand what you've been going through, after he lost basically his family. So uh, Jeep says, fine, let's fight him together. It's actually kind of sweet if you think about it. They are a married couple, and you know he lets his wife fight alongside him, but obviously Hanto has to win. And what happens here is, of course, um, Hanto, using the powers of his Choco Frappe, he freezes them both in place, and of course he delivers his rider kick. But Jeeb breaks free from the ice and uses himself to protect Lizelle. So this basically ends up, killing Jeeb. And in his final moments, he sees a vision or like a ghost of Sheeta, and they say like, "Yeah, we can finally be together again." And boom, Jeeb vanishes into thin air. Lizelle, however, thanks to Jeeb, so she survives, but Hanto decides to just leave her alone. Now, with that said, this leaves Lizelle's storyline still open. And while basically the main story by itself is over, this could still lead into extra content, maybe like like a TTFC special or like a V Cinema special, if you will, which of course, which would involve Lizelle. So, how is she going to exact revenge, or is she basically going to live the rest of her life, living with all that guilt and loss? But for now, I see revenge as the most likely plot for her again, in extra content. So, by the way, this is the first and so far only time that we see Lizelle in her full Granute form. So, again, seeing that she was left alone, so she survived her encounter with Hanto, and again, this opens up opportunities for a revenge plot with her, at the head. So again, she's gonna want to avenge her dad. She's gonna want to avenge her husband, and basically, so again, I would see that storyline as the most likely thing to happen for like post series content. Again, and with that said, so X, or Kamen Rider Gavv's official account on X, had posted like a visual poster for their extended story, which is Guilty Parfait. So in this poster, we can see a brand new form for Hanto. If you look at the poster, uh, like Shoma is in his master form, so Dakya is in his parfait form, a la mode form. So Shoma and Dakya don't have new forms, but Hanto does. So this would likely be a Hanto focused special, although technically Shoma is still front and center. So uh, I guess Shoma has still some things left to clean up in the human world, but nonetheless, we'll get to that later. So another interesting about Hanto's perspective is that in a way, his final fight is basically an extension of that with Suga. So let me just recap things for everyone here. So we all know that there was this Kenzo Suga arc, which focuses on him being the main villain instead of the usual stomach family, right? So we know that Kenzo Suga had developed the bitter Gavv by cloning Shoma. So after he was defeated by Hanto, so of course he dies at the end of the arc, but Nilv takes over, uses the bitter Gavv, and note, remember that G was given one of these bitter Gavs, which again would lead him to becoming bitter Gav Baki Baki stick form. So again, because of Suga's research. So while personally Hanto and the G have nothing to do with each other, so they just generally want to stop each other, but they don't have any personal beef if you look closely at the details. But given that G has transformed into a bitter Gavv and it was originally created by Kenzo Suga, so to some extent, Hanto's final battle is still with that against Suga. So I think that's the most interesting aspect of Hanto's final battle, in my opinion. Now, finally, let's talk about Nakia. Now, Nakia himself no longer has anyone left to stop him. So we all know that his main target is Glota, given that Glota was the one who ended Komel's life. So Komel, for those who might have forgotten, so Komel is Nakia's younger brother. So uh, Komel was at one point addicted to the dark sweets, but he tried to have a change of heart and turn away from them, but Glota had to stop him by killing him. And of course, when like Parfait a la mode made its debut, so of course in the end Dakia uses it to end Glota. So basically, Lakia's final fight, well, again, he doesn't really have a boss battle, but his mission is to basically destroy Stomach Inc. from within. Well, initially he did that with the help of Hanto, but uh, after rescuing all of the people who were turned into, who were almost turned into dark snacks, so they were able to save those people. Again, Hanto brings them back to the human world. So uh, basically, Nakia is left with a cleanup mission. So he just stayed inside the Granute world. He stayed in the Granute world to clean up the rest of the agents and whatever's left of the Stomach Inc. And he was responsible basically for destroying all the doors or portals that connect the Granute and human worlds together. Now, this was initially part of uh, Neil and Shoma's plan. So they were supposed to do it together, right? So if you remember, like a few episodes ago, so Neil asked Shoma's assistants, like, let's work together. Come with me to the Grand Newt world. We can seal these portals so that no other Grand Newt can go back to the human world. It sounded like a solid idea, but again, the caveat of that was Shoma would be stuck in the Grand Newt world, and he would be forced to separate himself from his friends. And they didn't want that to happen, so instead, Lakya is the one to do that. So, uh, so Lakya eventually destroys all the doors, but is seen, like, oh no, are we going to lose Lakya? But in the end, for some reason, he survives. Uh, the thing, however, is that his pudding and jelly gochizos were able to escape back into the human world, probably informing Shoma and the rest of their friends that Nakia's okay, but he's stuck in the Grand Newt world. At least he has the Alamo Gochizo with him in the end. So at least for Rakia, that's kind of a wrap. Now, let's talk about the epilogue of the show. So after the battles are done, so Shoma is developing new snacks with the help of Sachika. So he knows that there are former part-timers, aka the Grand Newts, who are still in the human world. So Shoma decides to develop the light snacks, which are a counter to the dark snacks that, of course, the Stomach Inc. had created. So basically, instead of trying to destroy these remnants, he's going to reform them through sweets, which is actually nice. So he doesn't really have to, you know, destroy anyone. So like Shoma basically has found a peaceful way to deal with the remnants of uh, his family's mistakes. So again, the other part timers, if you will. So there's that, and there's this one moment where Shoma drops by, Hidamari to visit Masaru and like hear Masaru-san like, would you try these snacks that I made? Like they're really good. So Masaru says, and Masaru takes out his journal, which has the picture of Michiru inside of it. So going back while Shoma was fighting Rango, so there was a scene where Masaru was still at Happy Happy Palette, where he was talking with Sachika. He found Shoma's diary of the various sweets that he's tasted, and again, it still reminds him of Michiru. And Masaru had seen in that diary that Shoma was talking about his mother at some point. But he asked Sachika, do you know about Shoma's mom? Sachika said, I'm sorry, I don't know. Maybe you could talk to him when he comes back. And he says, okay. But, going back to the finale, or the epilogue rather. So, again, Masaru looks at Michiru's picture, but he doesn't show Shoma. But we can assume that he's finally realized who Shoma really is, his nephew. Now, again, we can go back to a few episodes, and thanks to Hanto's investigation, Shoma does find out that Masaru is his uncle, thanks to a photo, Hanto showed him, and that is Michiru. So Shoma confirms that, yes, that's my mom. And he realizes that, oh, Masaru-san is my uncle, Uncle Masaru, But, again, they purposefully never told Masaru anything about it in order to protect him from a very harsh and brutal reality that Michiru basically died at the hands of Grand Newts, So they wanted to protect Masaru from a very devastating truth that could ruin his whole life. But seeing the events of the epilogue, we can safely assume that he's happy to know that Michiru still lives, however, through Shoma. And again, they don't say anything to each other about their true relationship, but at least from Masaru's side, he finally understands and knows who Shoma is. And that's still a pretty satisfying ending in my opinion. So I just wish, maybe, revealing some more truth, even though it's not savory, but I think at this point, Masaru could accept what happened to Michiru, and knowing that Shoma is his blood relative, no, there's still hope for him. So, again, but the execution of that is acceptable in my opinion. But that's just how I think it is. So, from Hanto's side, the after fighting G and Lizelle, so he decides to write about the Grand Newts and hopefully, release their story into the world, and maybe win a Pulitzer Prize for that. Who knows? But again, considering all that's happened, so of course, people of Earth are finally exposed, or they have been exposed at some point to the Granutes, what had happened, so who the Granutes really are, and all of his experiences. So he's tried to write down some sort of article that, again, that would tell people about this threat that almost ended the human race. But yeah, that's his main goal for now. Now, Dakya, like I've said earlier, so he is stuck in the Granute world, so he did survive his last mission. Uh, but yeah, while he is stuck in the Granute world, he still has the Alamo Gochizo to keep him company. So who knows, maybe there was a door that was left behind that wasn't destroyed, or maybe Nakia didn't notice that there was still a door that wasn't destroyed, that could potentially lead to him still being able to come back to the human world and visit Shoma and friends anytime he wishes. And who knows, maybe that could be explored in the next V Cinex movie, because again, Nakia is part of the poster in his a la mode form. So again, it is possible that Nakia could still come back to Earth. So yeah, that's generally uh, like the premise of the show. So another interesting aspect of the show. So going back to Shoma's scene after visiting Masaru. So he, of course, he lets Masaru taste the snacks that he made. So like, how was it? It was good. And then because something came up, so Shoma had to go immediately. But Shoma bumps into someone. That someone is Baku. So this is basically like uh, this has basically become a tradition for Dewa Kamen Riders, with the exception of Kamen Rider Saber. Like 01 to Saber didn't really have a proper handoff ceremony, but from then on, we've seen like these handoff ceremonies in one way or another. So again, Shoma bumps into Baku, and Baku, seeing that, oh, hey, you dropped something, so he hands Shoma a Gochizo, but it's not just any other Gochizo. It's the Zets Gochizo. So we do see what happens. So interestingly, like there is a UFO that suddenly appears and zaps Baku with electricity from nowhere. Like what? But again, considering that Zets is about dreams that become reality, so who knows? Maybe someone dreamt that UFO up, but attacking Baku from nowhere, like it doesn't make sense. But Baku says, "Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'll survive this one. Don't worry, don't worry." Like, something like that. But he just goes on his way, and Shoma goes on his way, and yeah, that's basically where Kamen Rider Gavv ends. Like, again, personally, it is a satisfying conclusion. Um, so Shoma does get to stay on Earth and his friends, although it was Dakia who had to basically sacrifice himself in order to prevent, further um, uh, tragedy from happening. So he had to basically sever the ties between the human world and the Granute world. Though again, it may be possible for him to return uh, through the Veen Sinext or so on. But and Hanto trying to again expose the story of Granutes to the whole world, and Shoma basically trying to make the world better with his sweets. So yeah, everybody does get a happy ending in general. So again, we do see Lizelle. So So she survived. She's definitely not happy about what's happening. So again, who knows? Her revenge might come soon. Now, let's talk about Kamen Rider Gavv as a series. It definitely has, you know, like mature topics like dealing with illegal substances, aka the dark sweets, and corrupt government officials in the form of Boca, corrupt organizations or corrupt companies that are trying to profit through the misery of people, aka Stomach Inc., and how our heroes tried to fight against it. Even though people like, or grand youths rather, like uh, Rakya have done harm basically. I mean, there were more, right? So there were more granules that, of course, did harm, and we even see granules that have have done harm in the past, but repented and changed their ways, aka the granute who kidnapped Hanto's mom. So, and there's also like the power of forgiveness again with Hanto. So he was able to forgive the granute that basically cost him his family. You know, his only family left, his mom. We don't know about his dad, but he definitely lost his mom because of that granite. But he was able to forgive. You know, people change, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. In the case of Suga, whose loss um, caused him to go a dark path. You know, I mean, all of the riders have suffered loss one way or another, except that one time, like that one greedy lobbyist who. So basically, the first guy who was given this dark Gavv after the Suga arc, except that guy, everyone else, every other rider had suffered through loss. Again, Shoma, Hanto, Dakya, even Jeeb. Of course, Suga himself became a rider at some point, and again, he has suffered loss. So, yeah, how we suffer with, or how we deal with loss, is also something that, again, like we can somehow learn from these riders, and I think that's also portrayed quite well in this season. I just wish there was like more on Sachika's side. Like we know that there was also something that happened with her that she doesn't like to talk about. She does have her own dark past, if you will, but that really wasn't explored. Again, I wish we just had more of that. Now, Sachika not being a common rider, I could deal with that. It's not necessary for each or for every female character to become a common rider, in my opinion, but it's highly appreciated. I think she might share that same position with Meisu, though, from Kamen Rider Saber, like a main female character who's supporting, you know, the writers, but doesn't necessarily transform into a writer herself either. So again, it's not a bad thing that she doesn't transform, but you know, there must have been a way to, uh, like maybe like writing into the story was difficult, I guess. But yeah, still, Sachika still did a great job being a support character for our writers. So she was able to fulfill that role, quite nicely. There were very interesting arcs. Again, like the Suga arc was very, very interesting. So it's not just focused on Shoma versus the Stomach family, but it also allowed for like Hanto's development. Now, Nakya had his own arc basically, which culminated in him, defeating Glota, but there wasn't really a specific arc dedicated to that, I would say. I think the lowest point was when Shoma suddenly like lost the energy to transform. This is basically just before he gains like Blizzard Sorbet. I really didn't get that one. Well, obviously Shoma was at his lowest point in the show, but that part also became the lowest point of the show as well, in my opinion. I just didn't get why, you know. Like basically like because he and Hanto like had this misunderstanding. So this is when Hanto found out that Shoma was half Granute, and he couldn't accept that fact uh, immediately. He still had that hatred for Granutes, and you know it really hurt Shoma emotionally, that it affected him physically as well. That one I don't get. Okay, but overall, Kamen Rider Gavv is a unique take on the Kamen Rider series. It definitely had some or it definitely had this originality. Like the first time you saw Kamen Rider Gav's costume, like what the heck is up with the snack aspect? The snack theme of the costume. But again, it was in a way it's like Kamen Rider Guy, like silly fruit suits. But when you watch the story from start to finish, like sh- sheesh, this gets pretty dark. Well, of course, Kamen Rider Gavv had really dark moments. Like we see Hanto's mom dissolve into acid, basically. That was horrifying for a kid show, you know. And I mean, the fact that the Granutes like open up their stomachs and like tongues just come out. Yeah, it's really weird, but again, it works for the show. So overall, with like its story, characters, I would say like Kamen Rider Gav has 4.5 out of 5 for me. So again, it's not like something that completely breaks the mold, in my opinion. It does have a highly satisfying ending. Some things could have been done better, in my opinion, but again, overall, it was an enjoyable watch, and I would still highly recommend for any Kamen Rider fan out there, or like if you want to introduce someone to Kamen Rider, like this is a good standalone for that. Like you can enjoy Kamen Rider Gav, or you can recommend this to your friends if you want to get them into Kamen Rider, I would say. So if they can just get past the silly snack suits, right? I mean, Full Malo is like by far my least favorite amongst the suit designs, to be completely honest. But again, it serves its own purpose. I get that, but in general, like I do like the power ups. Zaku Zaku chips, for example, Chokodon looks nice. Caking is still the best. Blizzard Sorbet looks good, and Overform, Master Form, again, it's a unique power up, like a 2-win-1 mode, and Amazing Gummy, again, it's like retool of various suits, but it still works well, in my opinion. It's just that it's a one-off thing, but overall, yeah, Kamen Rider Gav, highly recommended, and it's a must watch. So I hope you guys enjoyed this quite long review of the finale, and again, Kamen Rider Gav in general. So what do you think of Kamen Rider Gav's finale, or what do you think of Kamen Rider Gav as a whole? So leave your comments down below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Please do leave a like, comment, share, subscribe, and don't forget that notification bell so you get the latest from JEFusion. This has been Philip, and I'll see you in your dreams. Bye!